are interesting about these pieces, I assume from some of the earlier pieces, is that you have in a lot of the works basically cropped the head and any kind of like really identifying features out of your pieces. So for me, that becomes like a really interesting discussion about, you know, going back again to the body politics, is like how we view ourselves, how do people view us, and in a way, sometimes this male to female relationship where what do people look at when they look at a female body? You know, everybody's like, look at my face, look at my face. But in your case, you've completely removed the facial features from, and although I know material of yourself, they're not necessarily meant to be self-portraits, correct?
Right. So, I mean, part of the reason to get rid of the head is, well, there's a few reasons. One is the awkward cropping is something that I think is a little more contemporary when we're taking all these pictures, and sometimes they're just, you know, cropping is something that's come up in a way that was not an issue before because of the digital format. But as far as, you know, the meaning of it, part of it is if I get rid of my head, then even though it's using myself as a model, it's not necessarily a self-portrait. So I become just like this vessel that anyone could look, you know, sort of, what's the, you know, they could imagine, it could be anyone, so that you can identify with it in a different way. And it's not about me, even though it is about me. So it's sort of skirting that issue and not, you know, just being ambiguous.
Are you thinking it's more like a universal kind of figure? Is that what you're thinking? Or
well, that it's universal, but also that it could be anyone, that it's a little anonymous. So it's not about the, it's really just about the shapes of the body and the forms and the volumes and the skin and the flesh and the colors, more than a narrative or a portrait that has to do with an individual. So I think that's part of why I lopped off the head. And there was a while that I thought, you know, well, why don't I come up with like, you know, just a plain old woman's head that would just be, you know, brunette or blonde or, you know, whatever, and just, it wouldn't look like me, but it would be someone. And for some reason that didn't sit. So I just kept doing it without the head. And also because some of the photos I was taking, when I did use the phone to do it, I just couldn't get my head in there. So it was part of just the source material and the way the photos were taken.
Yeah. Well, it does really create this interesting optical illusion where in some of the cases, there is this like incredible depth to the pieces where it seems like sometimes the figures are falling or they're being like sucked into portals, especially in the case of a piece like Cliff, I believe the title is, or Drop, a piece like this where like there's these optical illusions in the background where you have these planar surfaces and then these like almost like a vortex kind of a burst below the figure, and then the figure to the ground relationship really becomes kind of distorted. I love this one where the one panel, the stripes seem to like curve around like a cylindrical volume. The bikini bottom is then like caught up in that patterning, and the figure almost seems to be, you know, caught in this web of the background there. And well, just as like formal construction, isn't that such a challenge to do these kind of optical illusions?
Well, they're not, I mean, it sort of evolves. Like sometimes when I'm making the actual process of making it, you know, the stripes might start out one way, and then I realize like I'm a little slow to learn. So I do a lot of painting and then painting over and then doing another layer and then another layer. So I realize, okay, if that color is darker or these values are similar, then I could, it takes a while to figure out. But I do, you know, I want to use the stripes and the optical illusions to sort of direct the way you look at the painting and make it disorienting. I'm not quite sure why, but there's also, the other thing I was thinking about when we were talking earlier, but one of the first artists that I became aware of when I was like a little girl was Escher. And I'm always kind of embarrassed to think about that because it always like poster art and all this stuff. But in this very basic, pure way of loving like the illusion of 3D versus 2D, I think I just really like it. Like there's something really interesting about the way that it's magical. There's something, that you can trick someone in with perspective, and it's just lines and shadows and shapes, but you can do these things. And so it's just sort of a very earnest love of that kind of, that part of making art and seeing art.
Uh-huh. And I think sometimes those early inspirations just stay with you.
Yeah.
Like all of your mature art making processes, like that first love is really still present in these paintings. I mean, you can see that, with the use of perspective, with the use of the optical illusions. Something that I wanted to just talk to the audience about today is something that we're really challenged within this kind of like quarantine situation, the stay-at-home audience that aren't able to come out to the gallery physically to see these paintings, is that there is this really beautiful surface quality to the work that, on screen you can see the form, you can see the composition, you can see these really great optics, you can see the optical illusion, we can talk about the concept of it, but you're not seeing the surface quality of this really nice, like velvety surface that I was really talking about earlier too, about like the skin tone and those kind of things. Happens when you're painting. Most of these pieces are oil on linen,
right?
But that quality, and maybe you could, for yourself, describe what it is, for you as an artist to work in this medium, and how, also just technically skillful these are. Maybe you want to talk a little about your technique and that process itself.
Okay, yeah. The work before this and a lot of the portraits and self-portraits were all on panel, which is, it was a different, it has a different quality. And again, since I'm relatively new to painting and learning stuff, a lot of it is this kind of like discovery that seems kind of naive in my head, but so with the panels, I would just get nuts about the surface of the panel before I would paint, and it was like porcelain, and everything about it was very smooth and kind of precious. And so when I switched to the linen, it was mostly because I started getting this kind of store-bought canvases and stuff, just so that I wouldn't have as much pressure in what I was making. And it's like butter. It's there's something about painting with oil that's just something really yummy, and it feels different, and it was new. I'd never done it before, so naively I was like, oh, I can do this, and just figuring out the spring of the linen versus the panel. And with the panel paintings, a lot of times, because I would do a lot of fur from some of the earlier work, or fuzzy stuff. So it was a lot of texture in that way that was more furry texture than like this kind of smooth skin texture. And I really felt with the fur that I was still drawing. Like I was still, it was like I was just drawing with paint. And it wasn't as much, I wasn't sure that I was doing like the painting thing. And so now I think I'm maybe doing the painting thing a little more with these. And it's just, I mean, I enjoy doing it. I'm still learning how to do it. So just building it up and,
Right. I was trying to see if I could find an image to show to the audience some of the earlier works that really dealt with the pattern and the technical skill that you were working with. Because some of the earlier works were really drawings that were color pencil and paper or gouache, and so much texture, very, very dedicated to all of the detail in those. And these new paintings, they focus on the detail in a different way and not in the minutia of like each little component to them. It's really about the overall composition. And these are really a great advancement as far as these big field. I'm sorry, I'm having Daniel help me with the technical stuff. So I feel like that you're handling the process of creating these works and the composition in a differing way than you had in earlier works. I remember that Daniel Aycock, who is the co-director of the gallery, and myself going to an earlier studio visit, and we were really surprised to see this process of you moving from like one side of we're talking about earlier works.
Yeah, I remember.
That were almost mechanically produced with such precision, and the final were absolutely gorgeous. But here you're working in a more overall way, correct?
Yeah, it's definitely different, because I did used to do that with the drawings, where I would start in the, because I'm lefty, so I would start in the top right corner and just work my way down. And this is definitely different, that I mean, there's issues with drawing. I still have this drawing. I still have a little bit of the same issue where I do kind of sometimes start in the right corner and move my way down. But it's different because now I have drawing, I have to think about layers drawing and when can I go back to a certain section versus another section. So there's different things that I'm working around, as opposed to before when it was just my own hand that I was working around and the smudge.
Yeah. Point. Well, wonderful. Is there any? Oh, he finally got it up. Well, so here's one of the. I don't know if people can see this. See the amount of detail in some of Emily's earlier works that. Just that layers and layers of the ivy there, and obviously again, dealing with the organic forms in the earlier works too, and I guess, is there anything else that you that you feel like is an important component? Talk about the tiny hand and feet that I love. Oh, Jen Dalton has a question here. Talk about the tiny hand feet. I guess that's a matter of the perspective.
Yeah, I think she's talking about, so a lot of it, the bodies aren't necessarily correct. And part of it is, perspective. Some of it is just from the perspective, and some of it is, I mean, there's a little bit of insight, I'm making jokes with myself. A lot of it is just, self-mockery, making fun of myself. And then also, like if someone has really tiny hands or tiny feet, or they don't fit with the rest of their body. I like this idea of things that don't fit. And I think that's part of what's going on with the way that the pattern, kind of cuts into the body, is there's something that doesn't fit. It's like, it's just a little bit off. And that to me is what makes it interesting, because if it worked out, then it would be like, all right, whatever. But so I think that's what Jen was talking about with the tiny feet. Like you have tiny feet, you can't even stand on them because they won't function. So.
Right. Yeah, that it goes back again to like the optical illusion of what you're doing with, and it's really fitting in the exhibition title, Tight Fit, where you're kind of like sometimes like modifying bodily proportions in order to fit them into the picture plane the way that you want to. So you intentionally remove the head, and then everything else has got to be
it's got to get pushed in there.
Yeah. Wonderful.
It's supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, there is a bit of humor. Right?
It's subtle, but it's definitely, because that's what I mean when we were talking about the work that the stuff about the women's bodies, it's such a loaded topic, and there's so much to be said about it. But there's a part of me that wants it to be a little bit light, like a little bit tongue in cheek, so that it's not a heavy-handed read of that situation. It's a little bit like all right, here I'm a grown woman that can't find the right size bra and it always, fall, or my pants, I always wear the wrong size underwear, that kind of thing where it's this sort of, it's a misfit. It's, it doesn't quite, you don't quite get it. You don't quite get it right.
Uh-huh. Well, you definitely got it right in these paintings. And it was absolutely wonderful to speak to you today. If anybody does have any last minute questions here, they can, I believe, just comment on screen here, and we'll do our best to answer them in this online forum. I guess you call it a forum. But we had really planned just to make this relatively short interview, just to kind of like keep people interested and active while they're home. And please do check out Emily Roz's exhibition online. We have a lot of compliments to you, Emily, and we're just really honored to have your exhibition, and really bummed that we're not able to have a lot of physical viewers to come out, but view it online, take a virtual tour, go to frontroomles.com, and thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you, Kate.
Okay, everybody, stay home, be well, and we'll be doing more and more updates.
Okay, bye.